Hello and welcome to the Retreading Business YouTube channel. For our video podcast series, the Retreadcast, we recently carried out an interview with Michael Schwämmlein, the Technical Director of the German Trade Association BRV, in which we talked about some of the latest challenges faced by European retreaders. Here now, for your viewing pleasure, is that interview in full. In this issue of the Retreadcast, we wanted to talk to someone from the European retreading sector who could update us on the latest trends in the European market, as well as being able to bring us up to date on the latest technical challenges that European retreaders are facing. We can think of nobody more qualified to do that than Michael Schwämmlein, the Technical Director of BRV, the trade association which represents the interests of retreaders and tire dealers in Germany. Michael, a very good afternoon to you. How are things with you?
Hi David, it's great talking to you. Things are improving slowly but steady here on the continent, as you would say, on your island over there.
Yeah.
But we are still far from being back to normality, but things are improving, and I think we have to see how the industry can cope in the next weeks to come. Absolutely.
On that subject, we are living in pretty strange times at the moment. Can you give us an update on the impact that COVID-19 has had on German retreaders and how they're currently dealing with the situation? And what do you think will be the key challenges for the retreading industry, both in terms of general business as well as in technical issues?
Yeah, well, I have to say that we in Germany have been pretty well off concerning the individual restrictions we have seen all over Europe. I mean, a lot of companies in the southern and eastern part and around the Mediterranean had a very severe shutdown compared to Germany. And we from the BRV, we tried to keep our members and also the retreading industry, of course, informed about the legal issues, what activities could be kept open, what would need to be closed, what businesses, what activities could be stay online and so on. So pretty much I can say that not really a lot of retreader or retreader suppliers have been forced due to regulatory issues of the Corona crisis to shut down. So on the other hand, of course, many industry segments like the car industry, the chemical industry, apart from delivering disinfection solvents or stuff like it, have reduced quite severely their activities, and we have seen a very slow down of the freight segment volume going down at freight transport. Also, I heard some news yesterday that the toll for trucks have been down 90 millions compared to last year. So you can see a lot less trucks and freight transport on the road. So that of course leads to that the demand of TBR tires, new and retread, has gone down. And to be honest, we do not expect really an improvement before autumn. Even contrary, we believe in the next 2-3 months to come, we will see another slowdown. And also these support schemes for TBR, new and truck tires like de minimis is finished budget-wise for this year at the moment. So some of the retreaders, due to the lack of demand, went into part-time schemes, which we have a system in Germany, as you might know, with some state support to do so. And actually the sellout estimates from January to May of this year is for retreads -6% to -10%, whereas for new tires it's even more severe, between 8 and 10% minus. And due to the high price sensitivity of the customers, generally we hope that the retreading sector might be less affected than the new tires on the long run.
Okay, so I mean, one of the things which had affected sales of retreads over the last couple of years has been the anti-dumping regulations. So let's talk about that for a moment. How effective, in your view, has that regulation been over the last couple of years since it was introduced? And is there anything else the industry can do to counteract unfair competition from the East?
But generally, I have to say that the anti-dumping or the anti-subsidy investigation as a follow-up was not based on an initiative of the retreading industry on its own. Because as you know, the demands of the World Trade Organization, if you start an anti-dumping or an anti-subsidy investigation, you would need to meet certain requirements, and therefore you as a demander of such an activity need to have a relevant high market share overall. And the initiative, the initial problem we had is that the retreading business on its own for the old TBR market, talking about OE and aftermarket, the retreaded sector would have been far too small to be in a position to activate such an investigation. So it really was the sum up of the overall European tire industry who was launching this investigation, where the outcome is known. And since the implementation of the anti-dumping duties, the figures of the TBR tire imports from China went down from about 4.6 million in 2017, which was about the peak of the imports, went down to far less than 1.1 million in 2019. And the TBR retread figures increased to about 4.34 million in 2018, which is an increase of about 150,000 compared to 2016. And the market share of retreads were able to rise from 22 on a European level to 25 in 18. And the reduction is still continuing of the imports in 2020. So in 2019, the total TBR market on the other side came down by about 6.5%, but the retread market share as such increased to 26%. However, the volume, as I just said, went down to 4.2 million tires. And in the meanwhile, a lot of the Chinese tires formerly produced in China have relocated their plants outside China, and also other imports from non-EU countries increased by 1.5 million tires from Thailand, Turkey, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, just to name the important ones in 2019. So the overall market is estimated to go down between 12 and 15% in 2020. So to sum up, retreads had a certain relief in 2018 and in 2019 market share wise, but at least half of the imports are now coming from elsewhere, no longer from China, at a price level not too far away from the Chinese prices before the anti-dumping. So in our point of view, certainly the biggest profits went to the second and third lines of the ETRMA brands. And as we both know, as far as anti-dumping or anti-subsidy is concerned, the retreading industry on its own has certainly no possibility to intervene alone against any import activities from other countries coming in. Also budget-wise, it would be very difficult to meet the requirements as far as the legal costs are concerned, which were easily a six-digit figure, what has to be covered. So the aspect that could help in the future would be more concentrate on the Green Deal and circular economy requirements. Retreadability, for example, could be included into the extended producer responsibility specifications. And retreads, of course, should be supported stronger from politics and in public procurement. But to do so, the prejudices against retreads, which are still existing in relation to rolling resistance, mileage capability, and safety performance, have to be removed. And there, the tire label and later the minimum requirements in line with the new tire ECE R117, in my opinion, will have to be met and will become more and more important over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you brought me neatly on to my next question there. One of the areas in which you've been involved with quite deeply over the years has been the subject of labelling for retreads. Can you please give me an update on where we are with that?
Well, as you know, BayPaper and together with ETRMA is already dealing since 2016 already now with the questions what could be an option to label retreads. As always, on the one side, any labeling scheme will impose new efforts and costs to the retreading industry. On the other hand, on the long run, there's really no way around, as discussed before. If retreads wants to keep up with the new tires, they have to meet the same but adapted standards. The whole process was delayed now due to the activities of the European Commission to update the labeling regulation. And there have been a long time doubts whether the labeling classification as such would become more strict and more severe and whether it would change or not, which is not the case now, as we know. Also, the glasses have been wrapped up down to 5 instead of 7 before. And at the moment, ETRTO and BayPaper are preparing a first presentation to DG Energy, to see what the reaction will be, because labeling glasses and tolerances for retreaded tires will be different in any case from the new tire system. And the casing import to the rolling resistant is also a very critical point we have to deal with. So there we will need a sort of a special treatment to come forward with a process that is adapted to the retreading industry as such generally. Not only the labeling testing, but also for the verification procedure in case for the market surveillance institutions. At the moment, we are concentrating alone on C3 retreads because they have the highest market shares in the aftermarket in Europe. And we will concentrate on the main sizes, so 10 to 12 sizes at the moment, that will cover about 90% of the retread market in Europe. I believe for the pre-cure side, it will be easier for the material manufacturers, in case they are prepared to take over a lot of testing. But to do this, the retreader as such would need to stick to their concrete process guideline to guarantee that the testing and the label values provided by the material manufacturers are really kept in reality through the process and the tolerances you will meet in the workshop. The bigger effort and the cost, of course, will be related to retreaders having their own compounds and tread designs, because they cannot rely in such a way to the support of the material manufacturers as a normal pre-cure manufacturer would be able to do. But generally, it needs to be clear that in the future, the retreading industry, the independent one, has to act with a higher stability in the workshop. So you cannot simply switch from one compound to the other because you just get a cheaper supply, or from one pre-cure supplier to another one and change your consign in your production parameters. So you would need to have a higher quality maintenance, let me put it this way. And this will be some changes due to what we see at the moment in many countries. And of course, even if the proposal is accepted by the European Commission in principle, there will be still some time needed to finalize the regulation as such, and of course a considerable period of time for the industry to prepare. So in my eyes, it's not very likely to have something in place before 2023.
Yeah, what you say there is very interesting, because we may well see a change in the way that tread rubber manufacturers around the world can access European markets. You know, you may see a change away from companies selling, you know, small amounts to, you know, on price and changing and retreaders changing their supplier on a regular basis, because they won't be able to do that, and it should. You'd expect it to close off the market to companies who weren't prepared to commit fully to the European market and provide regular supply and so forth, I would say. Yeah.
Well, only a supplier who is willing and capable of doing all these measurements and deliver all this data will have a possibility on the long run to survive. unless you have a really big retreader who is capable of taking all the testing costs and efforts on his own and keep up a certain flexibility in their supply and their material side. But generally, I think on the other side, it will be a good tool to improve the quality, stability, and the level of the retreading industry. Also, and there we are all clear, not everybody will be capable, especially very small businesses, to keep up with the oncoming demands on the regulatory side. That's clear.
Absolutely. Okay, so you've been closely involved with driving the European retreading industry's response to the tyre legislation for several years now. What other technical issues are currently on the horizon, would you say?
Well, apart from what we just mentioned with the tyre labeling, generally I think we have to keep an eye on what's going on the regulatory side on the new tyre, on the general safety aspect, but also on the type approval, vehicle type approval side. Because besides the topic of tyre labeling we have spoken about, there are some new topics coming up on the type approval for agriculture and forestry tyres and vehicles, for example. These vehicles developed a lot over the past years. The engines became stronger, the vehicle speed increased quite dramatically, and you can see these vehicles more often on public roads. Therefore, the vehicle type approval regulations, like the EU Regulation 167/2013 and the related 208/2015, and consequently the tyre approval for these tyres, the ECE 106, went into force. And the idea, as usual, is that a type-approved vehicle is based, as much as possible, on type-approved components, systems, and segments. And over time, this also affects the aftermarket. In this particular case, the references for tires were usually based to the new tire approvals, in this case the 106, 54, 30, 117, or 75 for the small wheels in the agriculture machinery. But in this case, nobody thought about retreads. I mean, there's no regulation for retreaded tires unless they are in a speed category F and above, so they are under the 109, because at the moment, a retreaded tire in the aftermarket for this type of vehicle is an illegal product. And we got back to the Commission and said, how can we solve it? And it's very disappointing what the reactivity on the other side is. There are quite a few retreaders all over Europe producing this type of tire, not in a huge scale, but nevertheless in a spec of a few 100,000 tires all over Europe. And there are a lot of jobs involved in that. So in the future, it has to be made sure that these incidents are prevented right from scratch, instead of waiting till a regulation is gone into force and you have to run afterwards to find a solution.
Yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to finish off by talking to you briefly about BiPaver. In recent years, BiPaver has been highly effective in cooperating on technical issues, but it seems to me that issues such as industry consolidation, changes in the BiPaver organisation, and Brexit, amongst other things, have led to a weakening of BiPaver's effectiveness as an organisation, with the BRV and the Italian IAB now being the only organisations in a position to affect anything concrete on a European level. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
Well, I would say yes and no. Because if I talk about BiPaver itself, I mean, it is clear that BiPaver, at the moment, has limited resources as far as money and personnel is concerned, at least compared to other lobbying organizations like the New Tire, the car industry, or whoever is playing a role in the game. BiPaver has been very effective in the last years because we had a full employed person. As you know, in this case, it has been me, but it's not necessarily related to a special person, to take care of all the anti-dumping, anti-subsidy investigation, the representation in Geneva, and all the regulatory items like the snowflake testing and marking as such. And this has been a dedicated project for a limited period in time, financially, partially financed by the BiPaver members, but also heavily supported by individual sponsors. And this project is over now, and we are, let's say, back to normal as far as the BRV situation is concerned. And Jörg, as successor of Tim, and I are shared resources, not fully available to do the work in a manner that I have been able to do it in the past 2 months, 2 years before I joined the BRV. Therefore, we have reactivated the technical committee, and that has been involved in the agreement about the labeling proposal that needs to be prepared for DG Energy in the future. And Christoph von Grahlburg has supported by paper at the UNECE in Geneva. But still, that is not the same as having somebody full-time dedicated to all these areas. Also, everybody, of course, is doing his best. I mean, at the end is you get what you pay for, David, and that's always the same thing. So for this area, I would partially say yes, our effectivity will be reduced compared to what we had 2 years before. But regarding the other influence, I do not fully agree. Also, we have a consolidation in the business, and that will go on in the future. E.g. Bandwulk has been taken over by Continental, Veculac has been taken over by Genesis, Reifenmüller has been taken over by Hancock, and so on. A lot of smaller retreaders disappeared over the years. And there's still a sort of join-up between the new tire industry and the independent retreading side, in my eyes. On the one side, because some of the new tire players which now step in this business are pretty new in the retreading areas and do not have a lot of experience as such. And the establishment like Michelin, Bridgestone, Goodyear and the others realized that it's easier to get things done if both sides are in cooperation and are presenting things together in Brussels, in Geneva, in the EU, or on the ECE level. Regarding the EU as such, of course, Brexit will have a commercial and economical impact to the Union itself and also to the UK. However, the UK will stay part of the ECE, so meaning on the regulatory frame, they are staying absolutely in line where they are now, so there will be no change. And as long as goods are imported or exported to or from the EU regulation, the same will stay for tire labeling and general safety, so EU aspects. So to get things moving, it doesn't really matter whether on a EU or ECE level, you always need the same approach. A common strategy to approach the relevant institutions, e.g. DG Energy for labeling or the GRBP for ECE regulation in Geneva. But even more important, you need to approach and convince the individual national representatives of the relevant council or committee. Because at the end, they are taking the decision with their vote. We are just there as a consultant party to give a proposal, to give our input on the technical side. And there, nothing has really changed. So every vote, no matter from which country, is important. And to do this work, the national associations are in charge and need to do their job. So only if we both, on both sides, are working hand in hand and are doing a proper job, we will get things moving. That's clear.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much for your time today. That was certainly a fascinating insight into the latest developments in Europe. I look forward to seeing you in person at the Tire Cologne next year, if not before.
Latest, hopefully, on the BRV General Assembly. We are still planning on the 22nd of September.
Thank you very much. I'll definitely be there.